Good afternoon. This is Mike Palmer from Mike Palmer Homes. Want to thank you for visiting our site and looking at our building lot analysis masterclass. Start with a story. The reason I'm making this video is over the years, a lot of people come to me with building lots. That's primarily what we do is we build on people's lots. And there's one in particular that stands out. A young kid, he's in his 20s, came and he bought a lot and he was all excited. He wanted to meet with me. He said, I bought my lot. It's got a septic permit on it. I got my house plan. I'm ready to go. And I did a little more research into it and I found, okay, I looked at the septic plan and where the septic went, it took up all the usable room on the lot. There was no room for a driveway. The house was going to have to be back in the creek. There was a creek behind there, and the well was going to have to be on the other side of the creek, and there was not access to get a well truck back there. So I called the county sanitarian and I said, "Hey, here's my situation. Do you have any flexibility on this, or could we rework this?" And he said, "Yeah, I know that lot very well." He said, "I wouldn't write a septic permit on it. I didn't issue that permit. They had a private soil scientist do that, and it's a very deep one. He goes, it's theoretically possible, but I don't think you could do it in any cost-effective way. And during my research, I found out that was pretty much the case. You could put a septic system in, but there really wasn't any room for the house unless you wanted a creek running through it. So um, I unfortunately had to break the news to this guy, and he was crushed. It was devastating because he basically bought an unusable lot. And I've had other cases where another guy bought one, and we ended up building him a house on a different lot. He found a different lot, but in looking at the lot, it almost cracked a joke about it. When the dinosaurs got extincted and the asteroid hit the Earth, that's where it landed on that lot. It was just this massive crater, and I couldn't see, building on it in any cost-effective way. I mean, there's always a will, there's a way. You can build on just about anything. But I figure if I could arm people with some of the knowledge we've learned over the years, it might help them buy the lots in a little more cost-effective manner, or at least have a little more insight as to what they're dealing with. So, idea is you want to have a nice new dream home, something like this, on a very nice, beautiful lot. You want to you want to be like this happy couple, all excited about your new home. You don't want to be like this, land for sale, and trying to sell your lot to the next person. So I want to start and say, number one, this is not financial advice. This is strictly for entertainment and educational purposes. And we are not cinematographers. We are busy building all the time. So I'm trying to make this video in one cut with a PowerPoint presentation, but the information is valid. Let me get to my GIS right here. This is a county website. It's called GIS, Geospatial Information System, but it shows us all building lots. So when somebody comes with a lot, yes, I want to go see the lot. I want to walk it. Some of them take extensive walking, but this is the first place I go because it gives me a wealth of information. Now, I come here, I click dimensions label. I want to know how big it is, parcel label, and 5-foot contours. Sometimes they have 2-foot contours, but what that means is between these lines is a 5-foot drop in elevation. And these numbers, see that's 790, 785, that's how many feet it is above sea level. So you can get an idea of how big of a slope this has. Now, looking at this, I can see right in this area here, steep slope. When the lines are close together, steep slope, and a low flat area. This shows me it's like a gully or a ravine, steep sides, and this is kind of the flat area. So all the runoff from rainstorms comes here. Oh, yeah, let's get this. When you zoom out, you can see it all runs down to the lake. We're near a lake. So this gives me an idea of what we're going to do, where we're going to put a driveway. I can slip the photography, see where the neighbors' driveways are, see what area is wooded. It gives you a lot of information. Now, this house here in particular, it's a big lot, but if you zoom out, the drainage easement shows up. Where is it? It should be here. There we are. Right here. See that blue? That means there's a drainage easement. So there's probably a grate and a pipe that goes down there. Sometimes it's just a ditch or a gully. And if you look, the drainage easement comes down here. That means when we get torrential rains and the water runoff goes through there, drains from the street, you cannot impede that. That whoever has the easement, it's usually the HOA or the county, has an easement there, they have a right to have the water runoff. So if you look at this lot, it's a very big lot. They got all this extra space, but it's mostly just buffer. It's trees because it's not really, this lot's not really buildable. I mean, you can, but it's 5, 10, 15, it's down in a hole, basically. But this shows us this is a nice big kind of flat area. When the lines are farther apart, you don't have as much slope. So this was the appropriate area to build the home. Built the home here. And you can see all these homes here are nice flat areas. Now you can cut and grade. You can bring in dirt or you can cut dirt out. That does add to the price. So you want to be cognizant of that. You don't want to end up with a whole lot more expense than you thought. Now, this house here, well, they built it. It's 5 or 6 feet. It's not that much slope, but you almost got like a gully here. You got all this flat drainage area. So they were to build a house, but they have a big lot of land that's not all that usable, which is nice for privacy. This lot nobody's built on. This has been a really hot area, very desirable, very much in demand, but you have all this slope, so nobody's built there. This one, people have come to me with that lot over the years, and I'm like, well, you have a drainage easement there, but somebody came and bought it sight unseen, and I wish that they hadn't, but they did get a nice lot, and it looks like they were able to move the easement, put a nice house there with a swimming pool. But that is one more expense, and you can't always get those easements moved. But there's a drainage easement going right through the middle. Sometimes I don't know if it's just a pipe under the road or if you can build over top of it. But I walked this lot. This is like a gully over here. These drainage easements, and it looked like a very difficult lot to build on. But they got it. I mean, you can get just about anything built, but you want to make sure you're not running into a whole lot of expense. Now, sometimes you can find a bargain. It's a bargain lot. You can do the repairs. I've done that before. The lot was very inexpensive, but I knew how to fix it. So we put the money in and fixed it. And so you can, excuse me, turn lemons into lemonade. All right. Now, another tool I use in lot analysis is a software I call Bluebeam. It's the name of the software. Get the Bluebeam here. Bear with me. Now, this is very useful software. I'm kind of jumping ahead. I'll go over this. This lot here, okay? What I did, I just snipped out a portion from the county GIS site, and I know this dimension. It gives me the dimension, so I can scale this. I can calibrate it with this tool up here. We have that known value. Then I can put in the house to that size. Now, this is not as accurate as an engineer or surveyor, but it gets me within a few inches, and it's really good for getting our head around this. I can do this very quickly. Now, I did draw a driveway for measurement purposes, so we can see how the driveway works. Obviously, it'll look neater than that, but it's a hypothetical driveway. Now, when you have a house, the driveway and the garage has to work. That is your most common path of travel. So that's one of the first things I look at. Now, with this slope, it's 5 feet in between any of these lines. So we got 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 foot of drop from the driveway to here. And it's not a huge lot. So what we're going to have to do, but this is county water and sewer. So we don't have to worry about a septic. So we can cut dirt out of here, rob Peter to pay Paul. So we're going to have to cut dirt out of here, build it up here. The driveway is going to be kind of steep. Fortunately, the neighbors all had homes, on either side, and we were able to kind of look at what they're doing and plot out a plan. But the back is higher, the front is lower. I like it better when it slopes front to back because then the front of your house, the better view. And if you have a septic system, it can be a gravity system, which is cheaper. I'll go more into that later. But we've got a lot of slope here. So what we're going to have to do is cut this out, cut out like a bowl. We'll probably have to put a retaining wall back here, pull a lot of the dirt forward. And this is the full basement. We might be exporting dirt. So we'll see how much we can use. Then they want a swimming pool, so we might have to put a second wall there just to keep that swimming pool height. But we got to be able to grade for drainage, so we got to be able to take enough dirt out where we can send any water runoff in the proper direction. Now in the front, we don't want to have 4 million steps way up high in the air. We want to avoid that. So we're going to build some of this up, but we got to keep this slope, the uphill slope of the driveway from getting too severe. But some people, so sometimes we split this up, a retaining wall here, one in front of the pool, and then one around front. And we can make the slope of this lot make sense, but it's a very desirable neighborhood. And these are the last lots left. Hardly anything left in there. So you kind of got to take what you can get. All right, this is another one. This is a lot we own. All right. I superimposed the house on there to scale so we can see how big the house is. Now, a couple of things on this lot. This is nice and kind of flat here. The other thing I don't like is you got your neighbor's driveway right here. Oh, well, not there. Right here. Well, right here is the neighbor's driveway. Okay. So you're looking right in it from you're looking right over there from your driveway. But, and we also have this here is kind of like a ravine and you have runoff that goes down. And I built the house across the street. So there's a pipe under the road. So we can build up dirt, but we can't impede this drainage in any way. So this is kind of the low side. And we've got, let me show you the septic. Here's a drawing from the sanitarian. This is an old one. It's expired. However, it does show what soil they did approve. This is called the repair area, which I'll go into that. You have to have enough room for 2 septic leach fields. And this goes over here, so we cannot cut dirt out of here. Cut from the back and level the front. So that makes it more difficult on us. So we would try to build up as much as we can here, but you're still going to have a high set of steps and you're going to have a driveway looking right at your neighbor. So that's something we want to be aware of. Because nobody wants to look at each other's junk. Get back to my PowerPoint presentation. Okay. So that's kind of the quick overview, but I'm gonna break it down in more detail here. Types of garages. Well, let me get the presentation view. There we go. Okay. Now we're back in action here. Oh, hold on. Just have a couple types of garages. This is your quintessential front entry. Okay. No great shakes here. This does dip down a little bit because it's somewhat downhill. I've got to make sure the water drainage is correct. We built this house years and years ago, but it's a front entry, and that's the way the neighborhood worked out. So we put it up at the high side because nobody wants a garage down in a hole and having to carry their groceries up and down steps. So this is called the side entry. So you come in the side. Now it is a little more attractive. The neighbors don't have to look at your junk, but you do have a bigger driveway that's more concrete, a little more expensive. And you have a couple of more windows and you have to put in this beam, these structural beams over here. But it is attractive and you have a little more privacy. This is called a courtyard entry. We built this years ago, but the woman was a very bold individual, so she picked a bold color. But I was a little nervous about it, but I really like the way it worked out. This is a kind of tricky grade here. In that it's a pie-shaped lot. It was very narrow, and the neighbors have a garage right over here and a driveway. And the other neighbors, I'll show you an overhead later, their garage is on the other side. So they could come in here, but we had to make this driveway on an angle to make it work. But they come in here as a courtyard entry. And that way, when they're living their life in and out of the garage and out of the front, they're kind of blocked off from the neighbors. They're shielded by the garage. This was higher up here and lower down here. Typically, we had the waterproof and the soil is actually higher than the garage. But we had to do that to make the drainage work. And sending a lot of water across the driveway can somewhat act like a dam, and you don't want to get standing water there. It's not a hard, fast rule, but rather than go over it, we did put a box here, a drainage box, so the water would go into there and flow and pipe underneath the driveway. so it'll flow out the back. This is a diagonal garage. They work out well when you have a homeowner association that will not allow front load garages. There's a lot of those around here. They want them either side entry or this diagonal entry. They do let that happen, and this is a very attractive one. We did these custom arches for them and everything. So, uh, okay, next one. This is a basement garage, basement entry. This one, they have a garage up on top too. It's like a tandem garage. You got his and hers garages, but he wanted to be able to bring his truck down there. He's got his workshop. That's his happy place. So that enters from the basement. But the thing is, you have to put more concrete to go around the side. We built him a tail here. You can see right here. That's where the septic system is to park his trailer. And right up here, that's her garage. We've got our dump trailer parked in front of there. Her garage, so I got a nice meandering sidewalk inside. She can pull in here, park her car, take the groceries out, and he can park his truck and everything down. We've got a big basement garage. This I call a side entry, but it's a rear garage. This is the front of the house, but the garage is tucked back in the back. Well, we have a nice turnaround tail there, or a place to park an extra car or a trailer. But they wanted a pool back here. They put the pool after we left. But this garage helped block off from this neighbor, and you got to have the privacy there. They can pull their pool toys in and out of the garage. And then this neighbor over here, they don't have a great sight either. Great line of sight, so that you have the privacy that a lot of people walk with a pool back here. And we left a nice buffer around the woods. So I'm going to go back and talk more about the GIS diagrams a little more. Although I did hit on that up front. This will be a little repetition. First thing I do when somebody brings me a lot or there's a lot for sale, I go right to the county geospatial information system site. A lot of them use very similar software, so you can figure it out. Not all places of the country have this, but just about every county in North Carolina does. And I've also looked at them in other states. So let's look at all the information this gives. This one I took an actual survey, but I superimposed the information from the GIS site. It gave me the topography. This was a very tricky lot. Look at all these lines. That means it's almost a cliff. But it had a beautiful view of the Catawba River. Watch the boats go by, watch the wildlife, etc. This is up high. So what this tells me, this circle here is kind of the top of a hill. That's like a mound. We need a flat spot for the driveway, but this area is kind of flat. Your driveways, you don't have a lot of contour lines. So we cut a lot of dirt out of here, this area, and lowered that, flattened it. We were able to cut a lot out of here. Try to get that down. Let's get 5 feet from there. We were able to fill up here, but still, you got 5, 10, 15, 5, 10, 15, 20 feet. 20 feet of fall. So we had to build up the back and build a big garage wall there. The porch was way up high, but we were able to get a house in here. Now, there was considerable expense because this was so steep, they couldn't get out their backyard. So they had to build a retaining wall back here. And that was a 17-foot high retaining wall and build up their porch. And the basement got expensive. So a lot of people, this had a dock built in. It's on the lake. A lot of people want that. They want the lake life and the dock. Now, this is a septic tank and a pump tank. That's what this represents. And all the way up the street, 600 feet away, was where their leach field was. So we had to pump this up around the cul-de-sac all the way up to the leach field. So the pumps all operate off vertical lift. This was during the middle of COVID. The pumps weren't available. We had to wait forever. This was a difficult build. So if you look at a lot like this, I think they got it very cheaply. They included a dock and its waterfront. However, there were some challenges. So you get the lot a lot cheaper. However, you got to spend a lot to build a house. So something to be cognizant of. This house as well. See, we had drainage easements here. And you look at the topography, you can see this shape means it's almost like a ravine or a ditch or a gully. And this is where the water flows right down here, down to the lake. And this comes across the road from the neighbors. So big part of the neighborhood, all the water runoff drains that way. And you have all these crazy contours. But this was the house plan the customer picked out. Well, this is one we modeled off of. We ended up designing it. But you see how it kind of follows the contours, the shape of it? So actually, we increased this angle so you don't fight the topography as much, and we were able to cut out a little bit here. However, this had a permit for the septic in the rear, which is a gravity-fed septic, which we like, which is cheaper, less mechanical parts that could possibly, go wrong later. But typically, when there's an expired septic permit, oh, that's another thing. When somebody brings me a lot, if they haven't done a perk test on it and know whether it perks, whether it's suitable for septic, I will call the county and have them email any expired or existing septic permits on file, because that gives you a lot of clues. Somebody's tested the soil before, so you can see the results of their work. But there was an existing septic on file. Well, if somebody's tested the soil looks good, and it sat there for 10 years, well, it's just a forest. The soil doesn't change. So the assumption is you can still put the septic in the same spot. However, when the county sanitarian came out and say, I don't know what the previous guy saw here, but I'm not approving that soil. There's ditches and it's not suitable. He said, I will approve a septic system up here in this area. So that's why we had to put the septic in the front yard, put the septic leach field. So we had to have a pump tank and pump it up there. So it turned, which should have been a $9,000 septic job, into a $26,000 septic job, because we get traffic rated tanks and a few of these other things. And I will go through and demystify some of the septic information, because it's not that complicated, but it sounds, once it's explained, but it sounds like a big complex system, but it's really not that complicated. So anyway, and the homeowner association required all houses to be a minimum 150 feet off the road. So this is a higher side, so we ran the driveway down here, and this worked out real well, although it was a challenging build. So I'm going to talk a little more about driveway considerations, because the driveway has to work. And basically, you don't want to get too in love with the plan until you have a lot, because sometimes I've seen people, they design this beautiful plan, but it fights against the contours and fights against the topography of the lot. So you can, if you got to bring in a bunch of fill and do a bunch of extra grading, you spend a lot more money, but you don't necessarily get more enjoyment out of spending that money. So this is one of the things we consider. Let's start with the basics. Oh, by the way, if you're finding any value in this video, if you could help us out, click the like button or the subscribe button, we would greatly appreciate it. This driveway, and it was actually, the slope was more severe than it looks here. This picture kind of masks it, but you had quite a bit of slope coming right down to a front entry garage. Well, when we get a torrential rainstorm, which we can get some doozies down here in North Carolina, we get a gully washer. We don't want it to flow down into the garage, so we slope this away, and as extra insurance, we put what's called a strip drain. This is just a long grate. It's got a trough in there so that excess runoff can run out. We ran a pipe underneath here and out, so the water can get away from the house, doesn't wash into your garage. This one's a front entry garage, a little different because it's sloped away from the house. So with runoff, you don't have any problem here. It all runs down the hill, runs this way, runs that way. A lot of times, I mean, we always want the driveway up on the high side, but if you put it on the low side, sometimes it's a better off way to do it, but you don't want to be going upstairs to get into your house. But you don't want water runoff. You don't want that driveway acting as a dam. However, with a lot slope like this, if you did put it over here, it just runs straight downhill. I mean, this is going to run this way before it crosses the driveway. Things to think about. Here's another one, big drainage easement over here, but this lot's basically a dead lot next door. It does cross into this person's property, but You see this shape here means it's like a ravine. More that's more of that ditch structure. However, it's a 5 foot drop, which is not too bad with a house this size from one side of the house to the other. But we're able to take this area over here by the neighbor, their driveway's over here, built up a nice side load garage. And this is just hypothetical. This is just so we can get an idea of square footage. Uh, Obviously, the finished driveway will be much prettier than this, but this gives me an idea of square footage so I can, for estimating purposes, and we would kind of want to see how it works. Typical driveway is 12 foot wide. Then we've got 24 feet here. 28's ideal. 24 works well though. 24 to 28. I had a developer partner, and he insisted you could do it with 20, but 20 to me is not quite comfortable, especially down here. We all like our pickup trucks, and you have a nice tail to turn around. But I like you to be able to back out, go down the driveway, or come in here and back in. Go this way, back in. That's what my wife and I do. Anyhow, driveway, sidewalk, but this drainage easement stays away from the house. We're able to get far enough away from it. Right here, look at this. Right here, we can see this gully, and this is the high side. And you can see from it's 965, this one's 970, which is the same line. So you can see which way is downhill. So I'll put a house over here, put a neighbor's driveway is far away on the other side. So you've got plenty of room here to be away from the neighbor. And I mean, you could slide the house down closer this way, but with all that room, that would be my first choice, where to put the house. And then you have these nice straight lines. You have a lot of distance where you can put your septic leach field and stay away from this kind of ravine structure over here. So here now, these lines are obviously off. They should be between the houses. That's just an anomaly on the software. But if you notice this neighborhood requires a side entry garage or a courtyard. This side entry here, side entry here, side entry here. Now this actually was a little higher on this side. This is the house we built, but I still didn't want to put the driveway right in front, and it's pretty flat. It was minimal. So we did, but you don't want to be staring right at your neighbor every time he comes out of his garage. And there is a drainage grate right here. There's a like a box with a culvert and a big steel grate. So any runoff, we just tapered it all to that drain, so there wasn't any problem with standing water. So that all worked out. And this time when they come out of the garage, they're not looking right in their neighbors. This one here's what I'm seeing. This neighbor's driveway is right over here. This side's a little higher. Well, and this is a septic neighborhood, so you can only cut and grade to a certain extent. But this driveway is not right in front of your neighbor, but it's still facing. They might have had some other reason, but I might have wanted to flip this house this way. And sometimes homeowner associations, they'll allow the courtyard, but they don't want to see it from the approach. And this is probably the way the approach would be. So that could have been the case. However, all other things being equal, I would have rather flipped this house, because that way they come in this way and they're still way away. They don't see anything of their neighbor, so they don't need to have such intimate knowledge of what's going on with their garage. But that's fairly small. You still have a good amount of distance, and you're not right on top of each other. Anyway, that's what we're thinking. Oh, this is the crest of the hill here. The hill changes directions, it looks like. So they're putting no. That's for the next house. I was wrong. But sometimes at the crest of the hill, they'll change sides of where the garage is. Okay, this is the red house we saw before. There is right here, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a drainage grate right there. So when water comes from the neighborhood, and then it goes down this right here, this is an easement. And these lines are off kilter, but this moves over. This is an easement where they had a big pipe go through for drainage. So we want to stay away from that. There's a big metal pipe in the woods. But this neighbor has a driveway back to here, and you're looking right in his garage. This neighbor has their driveway all the way over here. So we did a courtyard entry this way because it's a pie-shaped lot. You don't have a lot of room out front. And you certainly don't have room for a side entry unless you push the house way back. So we did this courtyard entry. And we did have to curve the driveway some, but it all worked out. And this slopes off pretty good here because this was a higher side. So we kind of robbed Peter, paid Paul, but right on this edge of the driveway, we were able to grade and move the material over here, build this up some, but that's actually a set of stairs that goes down to the backside of their house. But this is a tight lot. You don't have a big front, but you're still nice and private from your neighbors. This lot was very interesting. You had you have the cul-de-sac is up here. That's the road. Here's the lake. Everybody wants to be down by the lake for views. So this is kind of steep here, and you have a gully and a ravine here. So we were actually able to make a gully and a ravine, run a pipe underneath the driveway because there was a to let that runoff go, and then the rest of the neighborhood came down here. Not the whole neighborhood, but there's a lot of culverts down by the road for water runoff, and it all seemed to come down here from one side of the cul-de-sac, and it all seemed to come down here. So this has some slope on 10, 15, 20. That's a downhill on the driveway, but this gets nice and flat. So we had a nice house pad, nice flat area, and we got them as close to the lake as possible. I'll show you that in a minute. But the point is we ran a long driveway down here, and it was interesting. We poured the driveway. It was a beautiful driveway, still is. Then seemed like a few days later we got a torrential rainstorm. Well, the concrete had set, that was okay, but we weren't able to plant grass and get that growing quick enough. And it all the water comes down in between this driveway and runs down to the lake, and it just washed out all the soil. Not all of it, but a big portion of the driveway is gone. I mean, it seems like you could have fitted in a wolves under there. It's a big gaping space underneath, just set up for it to crack. So I was freaking out a little bit. I called my concrete installer. He was freaking out because it was such a big, beautiful, expensive driveway. If that thing cracked and failed, we would have had to cut sections out, and it would never looked as good. So what we were able to do is we pumped concrete in there, and we ran a vibrator and vibrated it, so it was, and we built like a little form, so just slightly higher than the bottom of the concrete. And after we vibrated it, it went up there and actually touched that concrete. We were able to get the height right, and it worked like a charm because I still go back to their Christmas party every year. It's years later, and their driveway is still intact, no problems. And um, I did talk to my landscaper, and I'm like, "How do we prevent that? I never want to go through this again." He's like, "Not much you can do. Tell God not to have a heavy rain right afterwards." We also planted instead of grass, we planted millet, which looks like grass, but it grows very fast, very tall, and forms a root system that keep that soil stabilized, so it couldn't wash away again. And it worked. It's all intact. But this is the actual survey of the house. So there's that nice sweeping driveway. We did have a drainage pipe go under here, but that was underneath the driveway. And right here, this is the survey. This shows a 50-foot setback right here. That means that setback. Oh, let me go over this. This survey is drawing. This dotted line is called a setback. It's an invisible envelope. You're not allowed to be any closer. This one has 15-foot setbacks. When we designed this house, we went setback to setback because we needed as much width as we could. They wanted to have an opening here so that they could get their lake toys out. Have a dock down here. But with this 50-foot buffer, you don't want to put the house right up on it because you're not allowed to take the trees out here, not the big ones. The brush you can take away. So we don't want the house right up against the trees, and they want a little room for a backyard before they get to the tree zone. So we pulled it back a little, designed that. You see there's almost no room here, and there's no room here, just room for the overhangs. Now, when the driveway comes down, another consideration here, when we were getting ready to pour the driveway, all right, I wanted to move it over here. And the homeowner was like, yeah, but this thing's a lot of times you end up picking more things and going over, and sometimes your wallet is a little beat up and tired, needs a rest. He's like, yeah, we got to save some expenses. I said, okay. I said, it's not going to be that much more money just to add that little bit of concrete. And I said, well, your son's driving next year. Where's he going to park? And he said, all right, you're right. We need that extra space. I get another extra parking spot. And with this long driveway, you have friends over, and with it waving, they tend to back off it, and you get that big tire mark in your yard. So you want to have enough room to, and when Mr. and Mrs. come in, you pull in the driveway, you want enough room to back out and turn that way, or to come pull over this way and back in, and have enough room for one of the kids' cars, etc. So regardless, parking is going to be it's going to be an issue there, but you still want to set yourself up for as much success as possible, so the family can get their car there and they can get out. And this is a picture of it. See how far we brought this driveway over? As far as we could. The property line's right about here. Anyway, this is not a great picture, but see, now there's plenty of room for everybody can get in and out. And like I said, your driveway and your garage has to work. This one is interesting. We just completed this home. Right here, see the driveways are? I didn't build this one, but I built a whole line, about 13 houses right around here. This one, though, it kind of drops off. This was kind of down in a hole, a little higher out back. But what was nice about this lot is these all have septic fields, leach field, septic leach. This one was not suitable, so we put the septic leach field over here. It's called an off-site septic. It's on a different lot. So put the driveway here on this side, up on the high side. Well, this is courtyard. So when they live their life out of here, they're not going to see, you're not going to have that line of sight. So this back side of the house will kind of give them privacy here. And you got all this woods here to get your privacy, and the neighbor's backyard is wooded, so you have the whole cul-de-sac to yourself. So I think it's a nice lot for somebody, especially if you got kids playing and whatnot, but nobody goes down the cul-de-sac hardly, except for people that live there. And we were able to leave more trees in the back too. We didn't have to cut out the trees because you can see that road. So anyhow, put a nice house here, but we able to cut a lot of dirt out of here and fill in this low spot, because originally the front of this house, it was going to be like 7 or 8 steps to get in your front door, and that's a lot. We'd rather avoid, and the steps are expensive. All the powder coated aluminum railings are expensive, so we were able to rob Peter, pay Paul, cut a lot of soil out of here, compact it in here, and it made for a real nice house lot. Now we've hit on septic systems. Now, if you're in an area where you have county water and sewer, you don't have to worry about that. But we have a lot around here, which is kind of unique, is we have county water, but a private septic system. And sometimes we have well and septic. With a well and septic, you really need a little bit of a bigger lot, and you can only put your septic. You have to worry about your neighbor's well, because you're supposed to be 100 foot from their well. Sometimes they'll let you go 50, but you can't put a septic system right next to a well, because obviously they don't want any of the septic ever getting into the water system. So this is the actual septic system going in. So hopefully I can demystify the process for people that are not real well versed on septic systems and how they work. Okay. Septic system is just basically a private sewer. Now here's the pipe that comes out of the house. All the toilets and showers and sinks lead to that pipe. So when you take a shower, flush the toilet, wash your hands, all that liquid goes into this tank. So turn the corner, go into that tank. There's a port to go in there. These round things are just access, if somebody needs to pump it later, into this tank. Now, to me, it's no different than sewer. You flush the toilet, take a shower. The only difference is every 4 or 5 years, depending on how much you use it, you got to pump this tank out. So everything goes in there. The solids sink down to the bottom. They form like this sludge that gets pumped out later. The bacteria like break down the toilet paper and whatnot. And oh yeah, those biodegradable adult wipes, all the septic people say don't use them. They biodegrade, but not as fast as you need them to. So anyway, that it goes in there, and then what happens is the solids settle down to the bottom, and the liquid floats off a port here. Right now, it's actually like a T-shaped with a screen so it goes a little bit below the surface so anything floating in your septic tank doesn't clog it up. But this functions very well. Then it flows out here. So if this is all downhill, it works on gravity. It just naturally flows as long as you got to have a fall, a pitch to the pipe, and it goes into this long line. Actually, there's 4 of these. You're going to go right along where these spray paint marks are. There's more over here. That is called the repair area. Now, this leach field, they don't last forever. However, they will probably outlast you and I. We'll probably be in a better place before this needs servicing. But they can get abused, and they don't last forever, especially without proper care. So you have to have enough room on the lot to replace it. It's called a 100% repair to have a second leach field. Because this goes bad, especially in the future, if we're no longer of this earth, the house will still be there, is the assumption. So rather than condemn the house, you just put a new leach field in and you're good to go. Now, these pieces are what form this in this ditch, we call it a line. This trench, these are like half pipes, like a big pipe, but it's only like half the cylinder, and the bottom of it's open. And that's so when the liquid flows in here, it's in contact with the soil. And there's some ports on the side. The lower side part also contacts with the soil. So when that gets liquid in there, it leaches into the soil. And the bacteria take care of all the nasties and filters out, goes back to nature. And then these caps go on the end, and there's little holes where you put the pipe in. There's a ports that you can knock out. So each end has a cap. So this one was originally scheduled for 3 100-foot lines. However, when they dug, they found boulders, so they had to change it to 4 of these lines. More lines means more end caps. Typically, for a 3-bedroom home, you need 3 100-foot lines. That doesn't mean you can't put 6 50-foot lines in there. You just have to have the right linear footage of septic, and it forms like an underground chamber called chamber system infiltrator. But this is typically the most cost effective. So these pieces will all go in there and form chambers. So let's see here. This actually has some video. Okay. We got some drone video. Not that much to see here, but that's where your driveway is going to be. Well, glitching a little bit. Anyway, you can see those a little better, but that is our leach field. Okay, this video here, this shows it all done. We have 4 lines in there. These are put here to mark where the end of the lines are, just some pipe. But see, we ran into boulders here. You can see the boulders over here, and you see the white rock where they started hitting rock. So they added this line. And over here where the repair is, there's a little space on the side of the house, which is suitable. So you can replace that. Now you can see when they're filling this, when they're filling the dirt back in, he's coming on a diagonal. You don't want to run these machines over top of there. It could damage the chambers underneath. So they push it in diagonally or perpendicular. You don't want to run parallel with the lines. Slowly fill that in. Once that's filled in, all you see is grass. It just looks like a backyard, and it doesn't get on you or anything. But it does. When the weather gets hot in the summer and the grass starts to dry, sometimes you can see a greener stripe here, and that's just because the soil is loosened up. When I cut that, we have these red clays. So anyway, that's what it says a septic system looks like, but it's basically the wastewater from your home flows, and it's got all this surface area underground, flows in there, leaches back in the soil, and that's about it. And you have to have enough room for another leach field. And I'll show you a little more video of it being filled in. Not all that exciting. That's how that works. Now, this was the drawing for that house, or the septic field, driveway, house. Here's your septic lines. That's called a chamber system, or a 25% reduction. That system there, they call it 25% reduction because in the old days they used to fill a pit full of gravel and put a pipe in there with holes in it. That chamber system allows you to require 25% less space. It means builders can get more lots in the development. Or if you don't have room, you can do it with less space. Now there's another system with a panel, which is called a 50% reduction. You can put a septic leach field in 50% of the space that you could with a conventional system. That's not that important to know. They are more expensive. And I've got other videos on that. But what you will notice here is this. They had the tank right here. Well, when we came to install it, this was downhill. You didn't have fall. So we would either had to put a pump in here, but we asked them, can we move the tank over to this side so that it works properly? And they said, sure. So they allowed us that flexibility. Now, I don't know if you remember that house with the long driveway down by the lake. Well, here's where the house was. There's a tank and a pump, but they didn't have any room or suitable soil for a septic leach field. So this was the neighbor's driveway. Then this lot up here was their septic lot. What we had to do is you have the tank, solid settled bottom, liquid flows off into a second tank, which has a pump in it that pumps the water all the way up here. We had to bore under the driveway, run a pipe up here, and then run our leach field up here. You have here's what's called the manifold. It just takes the liquid and directs it kind of equally to all of those trenches in the ground. And right here, so look at this LTAR, long-term absorption rate. That's 0.25. That's probably why we needed more lines, because what you want is 0.3, 0.35 is about as good as you're going to get. This house here, this is where there originally was an old house. Okay. This is where we had to put the new house. Now the neighbor's houses were right in line here with this one. However, we couldn't put the house here, so we had to move it forward. So it's closer to the road than the other neighbors. It's still fine. But then we had now interesting is you have a tank, then you have a pump tank, pumps it up to your septic lines here. Right? And they have to follow the contour because the bottom of that trench has to be level. It can't be on a slope because then all the liquid flows to one end of the chamber. But this was the most suitable soil, but they have a repair here and a repair here. So when they put in the repair, they have to split it between two areas. And part of this was where the old house was. Now, when we put in this house, their septic field, when we were digging the footings, we hit the old septic field, which is fine. It just costs a little more to dig it out, dig down the solid dirt for a footing. But man, when you go to these old septic systems and dig them up, if you dig one up that's currently in use, it's got this really disgusting black sludge. The gravel in there was just clean as can be. Those bacteria really, it looked brand new. It didn't look like there was ever a septic system in there. But we did have to dig that up. Now here's an existing well. So we had to abandon that well, dig a well further away because that well's too close to the septic. And you can't have it right in the middle. Now, what also was an issue, neighbors up here, the water runoff. This was like an abandoned road that nobody used. So they had dug a ditch and directed it all across the road, and the water was running into here. And the soil scientists from the county said, yeah, I'm not going to approve this while they got that runoff running across there. So I did have to approach them, a very nice couple. I said, hey, this is causing a problem that we can't, would you be kind enough to fill in that ditch and redirect the water? And they said, certainly. They knew this day was coming. Anyhow, and this is that actual lot we just looked at. So there's the old house pad, was right in line. All the neighbors' houses are like that. We had to bring theirs a lot closer, put the driveway over here. However, we needed that space. And there's a repair back there. This had beautiful views. There's a view of the lake here, view of the lake here, view of the back here. Really a beautiful, beautiful place. Now this one, I want to make a point about swimming pools. This had a drainage easement all the way down here, a big old pipe right down the property line. Had a grate there, so we had to be careful how we did our driveway. But right here, that's where the home was. They wanted a swimming pool. Well, what you don't want to do is get a septic permit and then come back later and say, oh, yeah, we want a pool. I've got another property like that too. Then they have to come back and redo the permit and see if they can find another spot for it. And I've seen that happen several times. So if you're planning on having a pool or wanting it when you do your first septic evaluation, you want to make sure that pool is mentioned or marked out because we have to stake this out on the property. And then they can go out and see where they can put things. But this is a gravity tank. Here's a repair area over here. There's a creek over here, so we couldn't get too close to it. But that worked out pretty well. But these are the considerations. This house here, sometimes this is all we get. Different counties have different levels of detail. This was an existing septic field. This had an old single wide trailer on the lake, and there's not many lake lots left, so a lot of people are buying up the old little hunting cabins and tearing them down, or the single wides, or that have been there for 60 years, and they're past their prime. So we actually built a big house plan here. I'll show it to you in a minute. But they wanted a pool. They had to be off. That was an existing septic. Now, when you buy a house with an existing septic, I mean, that was about the only way they could make this lot work and still have a lake lot. It's got a beautiful dock, beautiful piece of property, really great water access. So we and they've got a 50-foot buffer off the lake. So they were grandfathered in to be able to reuse the existing septic. Now, fortunately, in this county, if that septic ever failed, and we weren't even, it was looked at, but we weren't even sure how well it was functioning because it's small and how much is absorbing, and it had like a little retaining wall of railroad ties right next to it. It's kind of weird. It was kind of a point of nervousness, but you can go to a 30-foot buffer for the septic, so they have 20 feet where they can put more septic if this were to ever fail. Not a whole lot of room for the pool, but we put the pool over on this side. I'll show you this. This is the actual house. Beautiful house here. But actually, if you see faded under there, that was the original position, but we pivoted the house just to get a little more space away from that septic tank and to get a little more room for this pool. But this pool actually, see how you can't have it right on top of the septic. Pool is actually moved over here some, over into this area. Beautiful pool though, but there's your 50-foot buffer off of the lake, and this dotted line is your build envelope. But we took this right to the edge of the build envelope. Foundation types. A lot of different aspects of the foundation types. Sometimes we want to look at what's going on in your neighborhood. Sometimes the HOA requires crawl spaces and no slabs. Sometimes a lot's suitable for a walkout basement. Basement adds significant expense. So on a basement lot, you want to make sure you're cognizant of that as well. Now, this is not one we built. This is just a slab I took a picture of. In the slab configuration, the garage a lot of times is recessed. Not always. Sometimes it's brought up. Sometimes people want it set up for a handicap. So you can have a ramp so there's no stairs going into your house. We've done that before. We've even done that in crawl spaces, but that takes a little more doing than on a slab. Think about a slab. It's quick. It's easy. It stays cool. Some of the disadvantages is number one, you're kind of close down. Your house is right down there in the mud, close to the dirt. If you have somebody in a wheelchair or older people worrying about their future, sometimes a slab is more desirable. It's less expensive, but one of the disadvantages, you run your pipes and all your water supply lines through the slab. If there's a problem, you have to get at it. You're jackhammering up slab, but see right here, and we didn't build this house. This is just one I had a picture of slab for the presentation. But see, if you're on a wheelchair or somebody's on a walker, they can get right in. They have much, they're not going up steps to get in and out. But see how close? You're right down there by the dirt. And you have to have a flatter lot. If you have a lot of slope, it's much harder to do a slab and a lot more expensive. This is a crawl space. Okay. This is the way we like to do our crawl spaces. Once we build the crawl space, okay, this was higher in the back, lower in the front. So we have to have a minimum of 20 inches in the back. On the inside, on the outside, we can be up higher. So we're able to build some dirt up, get the drainage away from the house. Plus, they wanted room for a patio. We have some stairs up front that got a little higher, but not too awful bad. And then we have a garage up here on the higher side. But right here, I like to fill this in. I don't know if you can see, we put straw and hay out there to try to keep this red mud will splash and stain the brick. And I don't like that look. So try to be diligent. And that'll grow some grass, the seed in the straw. It doesn't look great during the build, but it keeps that red mud keeps that water from splashing on there, especially once we get the roof up. It's a while before we can put gutters on to catch the water. So during that drip line, we try to keep straw over it. But I like to backfill because when you build the foundation, there's a big gap here because the workers have to get in there and lay their brick. I like to push the dirt in before any lumber gets delivered because once that lumber is all over the place, you're never going to get a clear shot for that bobcat to come around and grade all of that and make it nice. I like to get it filled as much as it's going to go because some of that new dirt is going to settle some, right? It's going to get walked on. So that way, when the landscaper comes and does his final grade, he doesn't have that much to do because I've seen some people, they're in a big hurry or whatever the reason is, they start framing right away and there's this big ditch around here and it forms like a moat and it's full of water. And I don't like that getting a crawl space, although we do have a waterproofing and a drain system, but sometimes it can seep in there anyway if it sits there for forever. It's a bad look and people can trip on it. Workers can get caught in that ditch. Also the porches, I like to fill them with gravel and fill the garage so they have a nice working surface. So guys aren't, imagine, I've seen guys fall in porches and makes it a lot harder for them to work. So this makes for a nice, neater job. On the inside, we've got rock dust or gravel fines, we call it. It's just very, very tiny gravel, almost like sand. But that helps if water does end up in your crawl, a pipe bursts, at least the water has someplace to go. And if you just leave it dirt, there's like depressions in there. It's hard to get it smooth. And those depressions can be places where water could live. And then we have a drain coming out the lowest part. So that water ever were to get in there, it has someplace to go. Okay, this is a crawl space as well. I just chose this one. We ended up putting stone on here. So it looks real attractive. That block doesn't look all that great by itself. But this is the high side. So that way you come in, you see a nice garage is nice and high. So you don't have a lot of steps coming into your house. And those steps, when you got to build a big set of stairs, it takes up garage space. And we like to keep our valuable garage space. If you would have put it on this side, you'd have a big set of stairs to get up. And once we graded it and the shrubs have grown up, we really can't see that much slope there. This is the full basement. See a lot more of these up north. We don't have as many of these around here. We're mostly doing walkout basements, but this is a poured concrete wall. Full basement, sunk into the ground, so you have to dig big holes to get access. This is more what we do is the walkout basement. Now it just rained and there's leaves all over it, being as it's fall, so it doesn't look that great, but this is actually a very nice basement. But we're gonna frame walls around here. This is all waterproofed. We stub up plumbing, but this was a sloped lot. So we cut out dirt, see the dirt here, and we actually made a big area so they can have a pool. So we actually compacted a lot of dirt and filled up their backyard. But this is where the views of the lake are. So, there's a big 2-story and a huge deck out there. So you can sit out there. And it also, this counteracted the slope. I had to put a little retaining wall out here because you can't have dirt that high and just drop straight down. So we could taper the dirt down and make the drainage work right, and they could, walk out the door here. Soil considerations. What do you do if you don't have load bearing capacity soil or soft dirt or mushy dirt? This particular lot, they had the soil type is called bull tallow, and it was right next to a creek, and I guess that had been the drainage area and the flood area for this land for eons, and it's almost like a clay, almost like a quicksand. Once it gets wet, it's solid when it's dry, but once it gets wet, a little bit of moisture, it turns to like almost like quicksand. So the excavator we had was sinking up to the tracks. We had to pull it out with a bulldozer, but it did not have the capacity to handle the load of a home. So what we did, we brought in 75 loads of dirt. We had to have an engineer come out and design a system. 75 loads of dirt, and we had to compact all that. Then we had to drive pilings in the ground where they look like telephone poles. Here's the end of one. But we had to have that all along the footing. We ended up pouring concrete in here, but we had to have 6 rods of steel with one of these clips every 10 inches, and somebody had to sit there and bend those. Spent all week bending over 500 clips. So this went all the way around the foundation. Plus, you also had them anywhere there was a load on a pier, in the garage, spaced out amongst the slab. Had to put a lot of steel in the garage so it disperses the load. So they drive these into the ground until I think it was about 10 blows per inch. They have a big crane and it drops a weight on there, and that varies. It's not exact, but somewhere around 10 blows per inch is when they know they've hit load bearing capacity soil. So then they cut all these off. There were 99 of these pilings in there, and 96 of them went over 20 feet in the ground. So they're almost like fingers. So the bottom, they had to drive it down until they hit load bearing capacity soil. But even if, it's not just the end, there's also a friction component after a while too. The pressure from the soil pushing on the sides. Then these are all tied together with steel. So I don't think this is going anywhere. But you see a lot more of this type of construction down at the beach because, the sand. But not necessarily a bad thing because this homeowner ended up buying this lot at a very reduced price because nobody wanted to build on the bad soil. This one, we were walking this lot and it was almost, it was high on both sides. And we were looking at it. I was with my grader. We were doing our analysis, our site analysis of it. And we're looking at the slope here and this and that. And we look over there, we see a little puddle, but I didn't think that much of it. We look at it, we're like, wait a minute, it's shimmering. Let's go check that out. That could be a spring. And then we realized it's the middle of August and we hadn't had rain in weeks. It was like drought conditions. How come there's a puddle here? How come that's not bone dry like everything else was around? So it was a spring. So typically with a spring, I mean, you can put in a sump pump. Sometimes you can put in some pipes and gravel and direct it away. But when we dug this spring up, it split off into 9 different springs. And we dug all this out and the dirt was just all soupy. I mean, when we had a bigger excavator than this and we just lifted the bucket all the way up and let it drop free fall and it just sunk in all the way up to the knuckle. So a lot of boulders and muck in there. We'd dig all that out. But then with 9 springs, it kept filling up like a lake. We dug everything out. So we had to run pumps, keep it pumped out down to one small puddle. And that worked pretty well, except for it seemed to go through a stretch where it rained every 3rd day. Then we had to come out, take all the muck out of there so the engineer can analyze it. Then we had to put on these drains. They call them burrito drains because it's like a landscape fabric. It's a membrane that keeps the silt out, but lets the water go through. So we had to put that on the bottom and the top and sandwich it with gravel. And I think we had 7 zones of these different drains. And we had to put flowable fill in there, which comes in concrete trucks. And during this whole time, we couldn't have the water backfill into the drains. So we had to run a generator in addition to the existing electric. We had temporary electric, but if the grid goes out, you needed a backup, or if somebody blows a breaker or accidentally shuts it off. So we had to keep this generator and pump running to keep the electrical going. And we had a tank down there to collect all the water. And it seems like every I don't know, 20 minutes or so, that tank turned on. That water was just filling up repeatedly. And it still does to this day. I've been over there. So he wanted a generator for his house anyway. So once we got the house built, we moved that up the hill. But we brought in all this fill, compacted it, had engineers. And early on in the process, I told the customer, I don't know how long this can go. Nobody's ever had to deal with this. And there were 9 springs, plus there was uphill. There must have been some underground fissures or caverns that filled up with water because we cut into the bank for the driveway, and there was like a hole where after it rained every time the water shot out of there for like 3 days. Took 3 days to drain out wherever the water was coming from, and it shot out like a hose. So we had some major water issues. However, he did get this lot at a very attractive price. So, and once we got the house built, we looked at the costs. He got his appraisal value. So it wasn't like it was a tragedy. However, this was a basement, but got over a year trying to get this sorted out before we could even start on the basement. But this part's going to have, where it's all framed out, that's going to have poured concrete walls. So we set up forms and not the best picture, but anyway, this lot was unique in that it was next to a creek that had been there for eons, and it wasn't part of the creek, and it didn't have flood considerations, but the soil in that kind of low watershed was very soft. It was a soil we call bull tallow. And when it gets wet, like the bulldozers and the excavators sank in up to their cab, we had to pull them out. So it wasn't suitable to hold up a home. So that lot sat there for a while. But it wasn't the end of the world because the homeowner bought it very, very inexpensively. So the question was this a disaster buying this lot, or was it an opportunity? Because he got into it very inexpensively. But it took a lot of work to fix that. So what we did, we brought in 75 loads of dirt. It wasn't a huge lot either. Compacted all that. And then we see, I don't know if you see these round pieces under here, they're called pilings. We looked at another product called a helical pier, but that costs twice as much as these pilings. These pilings basically look like telephone poles. And they have this big machine, comes and pile drives it, it sit there and pile drives it into the ground, and then they cut them off level and they put steel over it. Plus, see over here, anything in a pier, structural member of the home has one of those pilings in there as well. So those pilings, you drive them into the ground till it varies on the engineering, but approximately 10 blows per inch. It's a big weight. Pounds it when it takes it 10 blows to get an inch. That's where you have the load bearing capacity on it. And this steel distributes it. So we pour concrete in that trench, and that's what holds the house up. So with these big pilings going into the ground, the bottom of the piling gets, there were 99 of them, gets to load bearing capacity soil. There's also a friction component that keeps these from moving. And I think, don't hold me to it, the lifespan of the expected to be 150 years. So, that's how we built on that lot. But if you're paying full top dollar for a lot and find a problem like this, it can be an expensive venture. So this house turned out real nice. The yard, we raised up the yard so it didn't look, below grade. This lot was another unique lot, another one that sat there for a while. And as you see the lake, it actually touches lake, which is valuable. But this lot sat there for a long time, and we bought it very inexpensively. So I was walking the lot with my grader, and we're discussing how we're going to approach this, and we're doing a full analysis. And we saw a little puddle down here in the woods. And we're like, okay, there's a puddle here. It was the middle of August. It was oppressive heat, hadn't rained in weeks and weeks. It's like, and we saw it shimmering. So we went down there. It looked like spring. So with a spring, there's remedies available for it. You can, sometimes you build a gravel sump and pump it out, put a sump pump in there. Sometimes you can just pipe it away. There's different ways. You have to get an engineer in there, but it's doable typically. Well, this one, what we could not tell from standing in the woods was it split into 9 different springs. There were 9 springs under this property. And where we cut in for the driveway, there were apparently some underground fissures or caverns where when it would rain, this cavity under the ground would fill up. And then it took 3 days to drain. And where we cut, it just shot out of there just like a hose. It's like a garden hose for 3 solid days. So this was almost like a lake. And we had to pump it out, and we had to have several dry days with all the muck and the silt. We could scrape that off, and it seemed to rain every second or third day. We just went through. So we kept pumps running constantly. Then we had to put in, I think, 7 different drain zones. And this was, we call it burrito drain, but you have like a fabric that keeps the silt out, gravel in there. It's called washed up. It's not the gravel with all like the sand and powder in it. It's like a certain size stone uh, for drainage. I had the fabric top and bottom, and we had to put in flowable fill and all sorts of pipes. And this stuff ran, uh, stuff drained down into a tank. Now this tank, it can't shut off because they're worried about silt backing up into the drain, which is a problem. So we got a generator, and the homeowner wanted the generator for his house, but we ran a generator constantly because up here we had electric from the grid from Duke Energy. But if there's a power outage, which there sometimes is for a couple hours, there was a power outage while we were building, or if somebody shuts off the breaker, some workman by accident, or the breaker pops because there's too many things on the circuit breaker trips, then there's no power running to it. So we had the generator back up, put a big propane tank out there, and it worked real well. And at the very end, we moved the generator up to the house, so he has backup power there, always. Now these forms are where the basement wall goes, and the steel gets extended all the way up through the concrete wall. This back here is going to be slab. It's lots of steel in here, lots of steel reinforcing, and this was all compacted and tested. So we were able to get a nice basement on there, but it took a long time to get through this and bring in all the fill. Ended up being a beautiful home, but it was very challenging. And so this is something, if you have these conditions, the more of this information you can get up front, the easier of a time you're going to have. Retaining walls. Retaining walls are sometimes a factor, especially on basements. Sometimes you can take a lot that's very heavily sloped and you can cut it and put up a retaining wall. Now that's not great to do on septic lots. It can be if you have plenty of room where you don't disturb the septic field. But if it's a tight lot, it could be an issue. Now, this retaining wall here, this lot sloped pretty good down here, but we put a full basement. So we call this a wing wall. We just put this little wall out here so that the soil could transition down. And on the back side, there was a door going into the basement. And it's hard to explain, but if you just had soil come up here and drop straight down, it's hard to, like right here. See if it's too steep for the soil to drop down, and you need it. The driveway's right up here, so that'd be high enough. So we sloped the soil down this way, and this wall helped with the transition. And that way they built a set of steps to go down. So that somebody, they had a mother-in-law in the basement, and she wants to be able to get from the driveway down to her own entrance. This house, now they did put stone up on here and made it real pretty after we came back and finished their basement. But right here is a drain, the big pipe that drains, for the neighborhood. The homeowner association owns that. It's right on the property line. But this dirt has to slope upwards. So we can't just have a big drop right here. Plus you've got framing members. So this retaining wall help transition soil down, and then all this is sloped this way. And you can see there's a little bit of slope on there for positive drainage, so rainwater can just drain out. So after they got it all landscaped and covered this with stone, it's actually a real pretty wall. This was kind of the granddaddy of retaining walls. This lot wasn't quite a cliff, but it was really steep. Now it does look on the Catawba River, which leads to Lake Norman. So it's a real pretty view. It's up high. You get great views off of here. And it had a dock and it's lakefront, but it's so steep, you could barely walk down it. So we put up this retaining wall here on the bottom, right here, and it was still steep. So we put up this smaller retaining wall for the porch, and then they can walk this way and kind of zigzag down, have a little bit of room to play with the grandbabies, um, and then kind of zigzag down to the lake. There's the back side of that wall. Now we did put some fill in the bottom, but at the high part, this was 17 feet high. That's a big retaining wall. That's six figures to build that. And this all had the soils down here are expansive clay soils. So engineer analysis, they expand and contract, and you can't have expansion behind this wall. So we had to dig all that out and put in a granular material that drains a whole lot better and doesn't expand and contract. So these things, when they get over 4 feet, they can get very technical. Um, but see, but these are things that make a lot work. Now you can still see it's steep down here, but you come out the back door and kind of meander down here and get down. Much easier to get down to the dock where the boat is. But you can see this is way up high, and it was a difficult one to build on. Sometimes you got to be, but they got the lot inexpensively. But if a lake lot costs you, 350, 400 grand, well, you get it for 85,000, but then you got to put a hundred or two in the retaining walls and get expensive. I want to talk a little bit about homeowner associations, township restrictions, and deed restrictions. Also, you should probably talk about zoning. Now, if you're buying a big parcel of land, you're buying multiple acres, and you might want to do a little zoning research in there and figure out, what could they ostensibly build next to you? Because you build a nice big home there, are they going to put manufactured housing in, or something that could have an effect on your property value? What do you want to live next to? But if you're just buying in a neighborhood where everything's zoned single family residential, and your lot's probably going to be zoned the same thing. Now, a lot of communities around here have homeowner associations, and a lot of people call me and they don't want to be in a homeowner association, but sometimes the lots are hard to find. They're not. So you want to know what their restrictions are, what size, what square footage, and make sure that's in your price range. Township restrictions, sometimes the township, they're a lot of times going to have zoning, but you want to find out what the rules are there. Deed restrictions. Deed restrictions are something that when somebody develops land, they can put their own private restrictions on the deed, like, no trail, no, RV trailers in the yard, no boats parked in the driveway. But homeowner associations, they have people manning it. They have a lot more power. Deed restrictions, they're deeded, but they're usually not as, they're not as strict on enforcement. Now, I did the first house the house I built. I built myself a house. It was the first time I bought land, built the house all myself as the brain. It was a beautiful neighborhood, huge oaks. They were selling lots there. So we went out, we picked one out, we bought it. And the salespeople were like, there's a 3,000 square foot house going up here. There's a 5,000 square foot house going up here. And there was all these great houses going up. But on the deed restrictions, it said they allow modular homes. Now, there's nothing wrong with a modular home. It's just, if you're going to build a big stick built home, a modular home doesn't do well for property values. Like typically, if all the homes are 2,500 square feet in that neighborhood, roughly there to preserve your property value, you kind of want to build at the median or maybe a little below. That's what I do with a spec house. But you want to be in keeping with the neighborhood, because if you have the biggest house in the neighborhood, you might not get your property value back. I did have one couple. We took the plan and they kept making the bedrooms bigger and made everything. They were expanding and getting everything they want. And I said, okay, we can do this, but you are going to be the largest house in this neighborhood, which may not bode well for resale, for getting property values when you sell. And they said, listen, Mike, we're 70. If we don't get what we want now, we'll probably never get it. So we're just going to do what we want. We're going to let the kids worry about that. And I'm like, okay, my conscience is clear. So it just it depends on what your personal needs are. So talking about When I built my house, in rolled the modulars right afterwards, and the lots where they were going to build the big giant houses, they quickly put for sale signs up there. So, what I learned, and my house was okay. It wasn't a huge house, and we lived there for years, and then we sold it and moved out. And a lot of nice houses came in. So it's still a beautiful neighborhood, but early on it didn't do well for the property values because the lower priced homes tend to drag your property value down, and when you build more expensive, you tend to drag their property value up. That's something to keep in mind. But pro tip, when you make your decisions based on what's in writing, not what somebody tells you verbally. Now, this is just an example. These are some clauses I take out. Use of land, each lot may be used solely exclusively for residential purposes, no dwelling in another single family home. These are in homeowner associations or deed restrictions. This talks about the size. This one story shall be a minimum of 1,800 square feet. Uh, if you build a two-story, it's got to be 1,800, but 1,200 on the ground floor. Required land area, can't subdivide the lots. And usually when you get, they call them CCRs, code covenants and restrictions, or code covenants, conditions and restrictions, which is basically the rule book for the neighborhood. There's usually a section, one section is just a couple of pages, which tells you what, all the pertinent things about buildings. So I always go right to that section. Here's some more restrictions. This one, they don't want you to repaint any house other than the original color without approval of the Architectural Review Committee. It is that they don't want purple and pink houses. No mobile or modulars in this one. Roof pitch shall not be flatter than 10-12. So they want to keep the neighborhood consistent. No chain link fences. Sometimes they have a certain kind of mailbox. There's no log homes. There's no log homes in there. But these are things to consider when you're buying a lot. Now, I bought a lot. I had a house I was going to put up, and I realized they changed the deed restrictions to 2,500 square foot minimum, and that doesn't work all that well on this lot. So, still deciding what to do with that. This next section, I call this brainstorm medley. Just I want to look at a bunch of lots and tell you what I see and tell you the story behind it. And hopefully some of this is clicking for you. And once again, if you are finding any value here, please hit the like button because that helps us get our message out. We really do appreciate it. This house here, we're probably looking at building after the summer. This was an old survey, but I took it and superimposed. This is the new house they want to build. Now, actually, this is very close to what they want. We customized it for them, but we have to tear their old house down. Now, their old house was there was a trailer, like a fifth wheel trailer, tow behind trailer. Somebody built a house around it and incorporated the trailer into it. My clients there, they bought it that way, but it's been their weekend or lake house. They have a big screen porch. But a couple of pertinent things here. Here's the lake. Here's a 30-foot buffer. Back in the old days when this house was built, they would allow you to get within 30 foot of the lake. Now it's a 50-foot buffer. But they have a septic, a shed back here. They don't want to go into that. So we had to call the county and make darn sure that we are grandfathered in. But they said if you tear it down, build a new one, yes, you can be 30 foot from the lake on that lot. But I had another case on the lake where we had a small house, small little hunting cabin. They wanted to add a bigger, full, 3-bedroom house and capture the views. But they said if you tear that house down, you lose your grandfather. Well, that made the whole project not viable. So we left the little hunting cabin, built the house, and then just attached it with a deck, and they just used the hunting cabin as like a guest house. But that was the only way we were able to make that lot work because we needed the space. We had lost that 20 feet. The house, the project would not have been viable. This is the same property. Now we have this shows where the soil scientists come out and draw where the septic can go because the old septic has to be reconfigured because it really doesn't have the capacity and it's having problems because it's 50 years old. Now, these are where the soil samples are, but they have a shed. Is really this is really sloped and there's some nice woods. It's really not tenable for them to put their septic leach field up here. So we're going to probably put it down here, but we're waiting on the soil scientists to give that to us. And we're going to continue their driveway down here. So, and here's the surveyor's drawing of the existing house, but we're able to make all this work. This is a much more accurate drawing, but I do those preliminary ones just to look at the feasibility of it because this doesn't cost me any money. I do that on my own software. It's not as precise, but it's precise enough to get the concept down and for us to analyze the feasibility. This shows a 30-foot buffer, 50-foot buffer. But wherever you're buying a lot, if some of these factors, you want to ask around and make sure if you have any of these factors involved, what they are. And they've got an existing dock there. So this is going to be an exciting project. And this just shows, a lot of times when they put flags for septic, the surveyor can come out and they have their GPS. They can record them in their GPS devices, and they can come back and put the flags in the same spot. But since we have a shed up here and we have limited room for the septic, then we have to know what's approved by the soil scientist and the sanitarian so that we can make all that work. This lot here, this is almost like a pie-shaped lot. As I've said before, this dotted line is the area that they're allowed to build in. But what I'm seeing here, this is narrow. So if you do a side entry, you have to push the house back to get more width. Be better. I'm liking a courtyard entry right here. Courtyard entry home. Then everybody come in, do what they need to. This lot here, we were going to put this house on here, but the grading really didn't work out with this garage this way. They wanted a side entry. This diagonal does work for that, but we wanted to put it up here on the higher side. And the HOA said no, because when you approach here, we don't want to see garage doors. It's okay on the way out, but not the way into the neighborhood. And they were pretty hardball on that. So we had to switching to a different plan. But we had this plan here. They wanted to see where we were leaving trees. So rather than pay a landscape architect, I just drew some trees in there and they said that was good enough for them. Right here, you have an easement, and this is like a gully right here. It's a pretty deep gully, and that's where all the runoff from the neighborhood goes. It's a dry creek bed, but when it's raining heavily, the water flows there. And this is where the septic is. So we had plenty of room for septic back here. This was kind of an odd lot. We never did not end up building it, but this was our initial brainstorm is what the client wanted was a house. Here's the front of the house. But they want a driveway to come in here with a little turnaround area and be able to go back, have the garage in the back, in the rear, and then have a sidewalk going up there and have need plenty of room to turn around. So there's going to be a lot of concrete. Now, you see this shape here, that shows me that it's a ravine. And you look at these numbers, 865, 860, it's descending, meaning that goes downhill. These lines get close together. It's a big lot, but this is all still pretty steep. And up here, if you take these contour lines, 5, it's a 10-foot drop. So the crawl space would be very high here. We can cut some of this stuff out, cut and fill, but we still have to redirect all this water, all this runoff. So it's kind of technically complicated. I don't know if this is the highest and best way to build a house, but that's what they wanted. So I'm seeing some additional expense in what we have to do here. This lot, very simple for the most part. You can see this gets almost ravine-like, but not too bad. But this is the high side. So with a side entry garage, I'm going to want to put this up on the high part. We got a 5-foot drop from here to there, but we can cut and grade some of that. And these folks, their garage is over here, so they have privacy, but you come to the driveway here. And we did move this around a little bit, but this is our preliminary. This was a preliminary concept, but I can scale this so it's pretty accurate to what what the footprint will be. I want to make sure we have plenty of turnaround room here because we built him a bigger garage here because he wanted to put his big truck in there. And we just want to make sure there's plenty of room for them to maneuver. Because as I always say, the driveway and the garage has to work. This is up at the high side, so we can minimize the steps and you just have a little bit of a higher crawl down there. Right here, excuse the sloppy driveway. I was just drawing for um, just for preliminary concept. Now, originally, this is 50 foot from the lake. A lot of people want the house right up on there, but if there's trees here, you don't want the house right up on the trees. You know, you can cut out the brush. You can't cut out the big trees on our lake. So I slid this back some, but it looks like you've got like a little over a 5 foot drop, but not too bad. Uh, Depends where the septic is or if it's county water and sewer, but you want to get these views of the lake. And this way you have a nice turnaround lane in your driveway. This actually should be back up here a little more. This house here, I see a ravine here, kind of all running down to the lake. Uh, this house, you can cut and grade. There's about a 15-foot drop from here to here, so I'd probably flatten this area out. Right here with this house plan, side entry, got 5, 10 foot, 10 foot-ish, maybe a little more, but you can fill some of that point, but it looks like for septic, you got a lot of room back there. This house, we actually built this house, called it the honeycut plan. They wanted the garage in the rear because they want to put in a pool. And they want to come out the back porch. And this neighbor over here, their driveway is on this side, so they have plenty of privacy. And especially when they're at the pool, you don't want, you'd rather keep prying eyes right here. So we were able to cut this to a point. We can put the septic back here. And right here, see these lines get closer together. They got steep. That dropped off pretty good. Still had a bit of a drop off. I mean, this crawl space door, you could walk in. If we put a full size crawl space door. So the crawl got kind of high on this end of the crawl space. But over here, there's a creek, runs from one pond to the other. And so they would leave some nice trees here. So they have, wooded barrier here where you can't see the neighbors. And this neighbor's over here. They got their nice pool. Does make your driveway a little longer, but they got a big 3-car garage there. And there's a door right off the porch. So you go to the pool, into the bathroom. And, there's a door into the garage so you can keep your floats and your pool toys. And this one worked out real well. We designed it that way. This actually we built for one of our vendors that sells us lighting. And she was having a hard time finding a lot. And I said, I do have one in inventory. Let's see if that works. And they loved it. So this was interesting because this guy had designed this house. And he bought a lot for it. But you see, it doesn't quite fit into the setbacks. So we had to redesign the house and make it narrower. But this is a very tight lot on a golf course. And so we had, we really had to stick to our parameters here. Fortunately, it was county water and sewer. We didn't have to worry about that. This house here, you've got some slope to this lot. It gets steeper as we go back, but it's not for a basement house, 5, 10 feet. These are 5-foot contours. Sometimes they have 2 foot, sometimes they have 1 foot. So up here where it's a little lower, you want to kind of try to keep your garage as flat as possible. We probably have to take some of the cut and build this up because you get pretty good slope on that driveway. That's a big driveway, and that fairly long, but we have to get the house back far enough where the whole thing works. There's another one, very similar. This more lake lot. Didn't want to be right up against the trees. Had county water and sewer. We didn't have to worry about septic. It'd be a side entry garage. This is pretty level across here, so you can kind of see what are the neighbors doing, which is a more comfortable side to put your driveway on. And of course, they have room for the pool back here. This lot here, once again, very tight. We did revamp this plan. This is one we saw drawn before. But we did a courtyard because these people have all kinds of activity going on here. So you can come in here and you have a nice view of the golf course. But I just wanted to make sure that house would fit in there. There's another one. This one doesn't have too much slope. It doesn't have many trees on it. That's another thing to consider. If something's heavily wooded, it's going to be more expensive in taking down those trees and clearing the lot, as opposed to this one, which is a grassy field. You see, these this does slope back to front. I mean, it's higher in the back, so but it's a fairly wide lot. So I would rather take advantage of this width rather than because the deeper you go, the higher your front is. And we can correct some of that with grading as well, unless, but we can't cut in the septic. But, we want to have the house oriented to the way where it doesn't fight the contours and fight the topography of the lot. Because when you do that, you're not getting any more enjoyment out of the home. This was interesting. Excuse my scribbles, but it's kind of hard to draw with a mouse. There's a single wide trailer up here. They wanted to build themselves a nice stick built home. So they lived in the trailer and used this is the septic leach field here. Use this septic till the very end. We put in a pump tank. We disconnected this one, connected that. Then they were free to haul the trailer away. They had a workshop there too. That's where they worked. This lot was pretty interesting in that you have a cul-de-sac here, you have houses around here, you have like a common area here. That's where the septic went right here. This is the repair area. So it was pretty tight, but they found a plan they liked. So I superimposed it on here to make sure it would fit. And the lake is over here. Here's your 50-foot buffer. So they're going to be right up on the buffer, but the trees weren't too awful bad there. And I put them in, try to have a big enough driveway with a turnaround. See, with the concrete, you can be out past that setback. But with anything structural for the house, you cannot. Here's another just kind of irregular shaped lot. Want to get privacy from that neighbor. We did a diagonal. Plus, this kind of worked well here. This courtyard entry with a diagonal garage, and we see it fits nicely on that site. This one fairly simple. Slopes front to back, which I like it better. But these lots are closer together. It was county water and sewer, but this one's a courtyard entry. It's not real wide, so a side entry didn't work that well. So we did a courtyard. That worked really well. This one here, we built this house. It's got a gully, it's got a ravine here, a dry creek bed, but handles a lot of runoff. So this sloped pretty bad down that way. It sloped back up. So this kind of flatter area is where we put the house, the side entry garage. Then they wanted to build the ultimate detached garage. So put that in there. This is a repeat, but side load garage, I could dwell on that. We've already gone over it. This one was interesting. You've got an easement coming down here, a drainage easement. That's a dry creek bed, but a lot of runoff goes down through there. So we could not disturb the easement. Easement gives, in this case, the easement was given to the homeowner association. The HOA has control of this. They can use it. You can't really disturb that. But you see the shape of this house kind of follows the contours of the land. Once that worked out real well because we didn't have to make the basement too big. And we cut it out. We were able to build up on the side. But we originally had the septic permit was expired, but it's still on file with the county. And usually you assume that septic's good. If the soil was good, had an acceptable absorption rate for the leach field, that it would be good again. But when the sanitarian came out, he said, I don't know what the last guy saw in this soil, but I'm not giving a permit in there. But he said, this soil is suitable. So we had to put in a pump tank and pump it up the hill, which was more work. This lot here, it's fairly simple other than you've got this drainage easement. So this tells me there's a culvert or a pipe that goes across the road, and this flows, that goes downhill. And this shape here, right here, this kind of loop, that's like ravine shaped. But they could still build there, but I want to put the driveway up at the high side. I put the house kind of in line with the others, just to make sure everything's going to work. And I just want, when I estimate a driveway, I want to make sure that driveway is big enough. Now I have 24 feet here. 24 feet works. I'd rather see 28 if possible. I did have a developer partner here. This one looks fairly simple in my mind. We do have a drainage easement on the lot next door. So this dotted line tells me that there's probably a culvert goes under the road where all the storm drainage and runoff goes. This does encroach onto this lot some, but this was county water and sewer, so we don't got to worry about a septic field. Now, this shape here tells me that's kind of like got a little gully shape, but not too bad. You got a fair amount of distance before it drops 5 feet. But what's significant here is the width of this house. These contour lines is pretty uniform running front to back. Side to side, you do have about a 5 foot drop, but we can cut and fill. But here, you got to be 10 feet from the property line. I wanted to get it right up close to the property line because I want this as wide as possible. And this neighbor is all the way over here. You just have a wooded lot that gets some storm runoff on it, but that's, you're not getting too close to your neighbor, so you have that privacy. But this shows we get 24 feet here for the garage turnaround. And as I always say, the garage and the driveway have to work. And I do this for estimating purposes. Obviously, this is not our final drawing by any means, but it gives me an idea of the square footage. A 4 foot wide sidewalk, 12 foot wide entrance, and 24 foot is good to turn around in. Although ideally, I like 28 just because people have trucks and sometimes other people park and whatnot. But um, I had a developer partner who would always say 20 feet is good enough for a side entry. But he was, his background was always in urban areas where space is at more of a premium. Out here where we have wider lots, I like to get that driveway wider, just for comfort. This one is this one was pretty interesting because what they had, the only place suitable for septic was up here, and then the lot sloped off pretty bad, and there was like you know, this is where there was a, you know, dry creek bed where all the runoff goes, and this was kind of down in a hole. It sloped off pretty badly. That's where they had the house, and they needed the front for septic. Well, that it wasn't a real attractive lot for that reason because the way this topography was, that's not a real great place to put the house. But they needed this for septic. So my client was looking at one of our lots, but he found this one. He got it at an attractive price. But then we went and revamped the septic and we chose like a narrower house plan here. I superimposed the whole page here, but then I took and slid this over. See, first like this, we don't have room for septic, but the driveway doesn't have to be behind the setback, just a structural part. So we pulled the house all the way over to this side. And that gave us more room over here. And we had just enough room to put in a 50% reduction. But the sanitarian came out and designed the septic system, and he made us GPS all the points because we were just so like you got to be 5 foot off the house and you got to be a certain distance off the property line, and we just barely made it. But we were able to get a septic plan in there, and so we took lemons, turned them into lemonade. But what happened when the pandemic came out? This particular customer was like, I can't. That was all I had all my savings in this lot, and now because of the pandemic, I've lost my job. So we need to call in our markers. Would you buy this lot from us for what we paid for it? And I thought that was a very fair deal, and I was happy to help them out because they couldn't build a house anyway. So it worked for both sides. I got this lot at an attractive price, and I was able. Then somebody came along, so we put a house on there for them, and they wanted a swimming pool, and there was room for the swimming pool now, which it wouldn't have been before, and room for the septic. So it was a happy story uh, that we got them the house that they wanted at a very attractive price. So anyhow, so sometimes a problem can be an opportunity. This one I found was pretty straightforward. Here's what I see. I see this is almost like a ravine, this shape. So it's kind of like a gully that goes along here. But this is a nice straight line back. It's a pretty deep lot, so you got plenty of room for your septic back here. This slopes, close to 5 feet from one side to the other, which isn't too bad, but we were able to cut a little off here and mitigate that slope some, and then push some dirt in the front, do some landscaping, try to get this sidewalk up a little higher so they don't have a lot of steps. So that worked out pretty well. And this neighbor's far away over here. This neighbor's far away over here, so you don't have to worry about privacy. And we're able to get the driveway up on the uphill side. That worked out. This one is county water and sewer. We don't have to worry about well and septic. This we did make it a front load garage because there's just not enough width here. These were not big lots, but I just drew a line here right across, same equidistance with the neighbor's house, pushed his house up against here. We had to take out enough trees. That was a little bit of a stickling point because the HOA was like, no, this guy took out too many trees. We're not putting up with that again. You got it in this neighborhood, you have to save a lot of trees. And I'm all for saving the trees, but you have to have enough for a backyard, and you have to be able to grade for positive drainage so water flows away from the house. Well, you can't cut the grade and save the trees. So we saved a lot of trees, but we kind of reached a compromise with the HOA. And they were mad about all the trees got taken out here, but that's where the sewer line goes. So really didn't have much choice. You can't dig a big old, put in a sewer line and keep all the trees there. So anyhow, I'm a big advocate of after you build a house, plant some decorative trees because the woods look nice till you separate them, and then the trees look very scraggly, and it's not a great look. So I feel like the lot tells you what woods to keep. Because you've got to have the grade right, you got to have things slope right. You don't want you can't have trees 4 foot from the house. They got to have a certain amount of distance. But this was simple. We tied in the water, tied in the sewer in the back, tied in the water in the front, did a front load garage. So this layout was not very complicated at all. But you've got this shape of this contour line, which tells me it's kind of a little bit of a trough here, but no great shakes. There's plenty of room in between there. So it's almost like it's a flat lot in a neighborhood, rectangular shaped. That one was pretty simple. This one, this house was so cool. This was like a modern farmhouse. But if we look at the topography, this is a very large lot, so they have plenty of room for septic. You do see right here, this is like your dry creek bed ravine, but these are 2 foot contours instead of 5 foot. So this is 10 foot, this is 10 foot between here and here. It's a 4 acre lot. But you did have some slope back here, but this was kind of like a mound here. See that circle? That's all. So this was kind of the flat part. So we put the front of the house in the flat part. We're able to, grade a little dirt off here. I tried to keep the driveway shorter. It wasn't exactly at this angle, but if you put the driveway over here, it starts to get long. I did some really cool pin oaks, some giant oaks, which are pretty bulletproof. When you do the build process, like poplars don't do well, and pine trees, once you take their friends away, they tend to come down. But there's some really cool, majestic oaks up here. So uh, that looked really good. Nice meandering driveway up, and all this space back here. There was plenty of room for septic. With all that kind of room, you're bound to have good soil. This one is pretty interesting. Uh, it's This is one we're working on. Okay, and these people went back and designed a house. Now I'm going to go to their. This septic permit is expired, but it was on file, so it shows somebody has tested this soil. And I was out walking, and I saw there's a gully here. Here's an area for the primary septic, and here's an area for the repair, meaning if this ever goes bad, you have to have room for a leach field. But they have the driveway up top here, and they have the house, a lot further back. Now, when I look at the septic permit, this portion here tells me vertical T and J panels. That's a 50% reduction, meaning it takes less space, but it is more expensive. And also here shows pump. There's the initial and then there's repair, but the initial is all we're putting in now. The pump, that's thousands of dollars to have that pump system. You have to put another tank and another pump, and the pumps are expensive and the tank's expensive. And this is expensive. But what I also see is number of occupants, max is 10. That tells me it's a 5 bedroom. My folks are building a 3 bedroom. The other pertinent factor here See this number LTAR, which stands for long-term absorption rate. The long-term absorption rate is 0.3. 0.35 is about the best you can get, but 0.3 is good. So that tells us we have good soil on this site. Now, what I hope to do, because these folks did design the plan differently with a courtyard. Now, it doesn't. This driveway doesn't have to go right down the middle. We can kind of make it meander here, but still, it's going to interfere with where that septic goes. So what I'm thinking is we have to get a new septic permit anyway because the other one's expired. Hiring a private soil scientist. They cost a little more, but the odds of them saving you that money are very strong because the county people, when they come out, they're very stressed. There's all kinds of building going on right now. They always seem undermanned and don't have the resources. So they want you to have this staked out, come out and give you a plan, and then that's your plan. That's your septic plan. It's like, okay, can we move this here? What it would work out better if we move that there? They tend to not have that flexibility. It's usually like you can reapply, and but then you start the process over. Sometimes it takes months. So usually with a private soil scientist, I can get them out there in weeks, and I can meet them out there and say, okay, can we get a conventional system here rather than the expensive T and J? Can we get a standard infiltrator system? Can we move the house back? If we move the house back a little bit, can we still have room? And they'll work with you a little more that way. As a general rule, some of these people from the county are very very good, but I've always had an easier time working with the private people, and they do come out faster. Um, Anyhow, but the way this is going to be this half of the house is going to be on a basement, and these are 5 foot contours. You got 5, 10 foot drops over a 10 foot basement. This would be good here. We're going to cut some of this dirt off, but I'm thinking this drops pretty good here, right where you park your cars. Pretty good slope there. So we'd either take out the soil that we cut out of here and put all that material here. I'm sorry, the clean fill. We can't take topsoil, but a good structural fill. But I'm also thinking if I move the house back some and get it in it, this almost forms like a tongue the way this curls out. Get that garage up here. After I walked it and looked at this particular lot, it seemed like it's better if we could pull this back some, put that here. Might give us enough room for septic in the front, but I'd still rather try to get it in the back because there's a pump system and a gravity system. We always like the gravity better because the pump is one more thing to go wrong, and the gravity, still works if your electric were out or whatever. Uh, so and I'm meeting with these folks Monday. So, but this is a fairly complicated lot. You've got a drainage easement down here and all this business going on. This is very low here. Looks like half the neighborhood drains down here, but this is a popular neighborhood, been around for a while. So all the good, flat, easier lots have been bought up. Probably built half a dozen in here. So just getting a lot at all in that neighborhood is tough. Now this is the very last slide, and this one's a little advanced for just building a residential house, but the concept is still the same. So I want to go over that. So this is an assisted living center right here. It's 2 houses joined together and another house on the end, but it's been converted to assisted living with kitchens and whatnot. It's got a river that comes down here. This is a river. This is the riverbank. It's real pretty. It's got all kinds of rocks and like little bitty rapids, and it's fun to sit there and look at and listen to the sounds of the water rushing through there. So the residents like to do that. They like the river. Now, the idea here was to expand this. So the gray, the lighter, that's the current slope. These straighter lines here, that's the grading plan for a proposed future slope. Up here is the existing bank. So here the bank's kind of shallow, so we're just going to build up a lot of soil here and then put structural fill, and then good clean fill in here and compact it, and then make this a buildable area. And the idea is to add more buildings, expand the residential living center or assisted living center. Now, short term, here was a proposed idea to build this building here. Now, it's got to be 10 foot off the property setbacks, but we allowed 20 feet so that we could build a walkway, and then you want to build a big deck out back. So that way the residents can walk, and if they're in a wheelchair, wheel around outside and, be able to look at the river and all that. Now, we got to have the front of this a nice height from the road because you have to have like a ramp so people can pull up, drop people off, etc., like this one. Now, if we take this one and we look at like what the height here is, we drop down. What I wanted to go over here is this is an assisted living center. So this is two residential buildings converted to assisted living, and there's another residential building in the back. There's a nice river here. It's a real picturesque scene, so the residents can look at the river and hear the babbling brook, and there's some little kind of rapids there. It's a fun place to watch. Now, this site, you see all these contour lines. Okay, this is a new building we were analyzing to build. All these are all 1 foot contour lines, but this is kind of a parking lot. It drops off here. What these dark lines are a proposed grading plan to continue this bank of the river all the way up here and make this a nice flat area. But before we did that, we wanted to look at the feasibility of putting another building here. There's going to be more buildings here in the future. That would probably be with the next owner, but we wanted to put one here. Now, right here, this was an old, when the property was bought, this was an old duplex. Well, the town, it was past its useful life. The previous owner had used it for storage, but the municipality came out and said, "Hey, that's condemned. You got to tear that down." We said, "Okay, yeah." It was about to fall down anyway. So had that torn down and just recovered it to grass. But we're looking at the idea of putting a long building out here, having 20 foot on each side to make a 10-foot walkway so the residents could go around, and some of them are wheelchairs. They can wheel around and enjoy the scenery and the river covered area. We want in the front, it has to be the same height as the road here, or close to it, a little above, so that you can have access, people can come in easily. So the height would be set at the road. Now, this one here, this building comes down from the road, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 6 foot drop, a little up there, little above here, so you can have a porch to step off, and there's a ramp, and then so that's a good height back there. But if we follow this height around here to this building, we notice you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 foot drop. So if we put in a basement at the same height, actually it comes down a couple of feet because the road slopes down, but still the back of this building will be 6 or 7 feet up in the air. Really needs to be about this height. So building this building the way it sits, all these grayed out lines, that's the way it sits now. This line here, these kind of straighter lines, that's a proposed grading plan. So once we bring in the fill and bring in the structural fill, compact it, and do this the way the grading plan is, then this would be more feasible. Right now, having this 6 and 7 feet up in the air, and we want to have some rooms for a walkout basement so people can have a view of the river there, it's not really feasible at this point. Best way to do it is to do all this structural work, but that's a pretty big cash outlay that's not in the cards right now. So this building's going to kind of have to wait. This is more complicated than just about any of the residential lots we're doing, but it's the same concepts. So I thought it might be of interest to you there. This lot here is an interesting one, and we're currently working on that, meeting with the folks here our first day of next week to discuss this. But I've been out there walking this with the grader, and this is just hypothetical where the house would go. The homeowners association says it's got to be 125 foot minimum from the setback or the road. This is where the neighbor's house is. What's going on with this lot, you can see this is kind of the high spot here. Kind of this rounded area is almost like a tongue that sticks out. There's a lot of slope here, like this 5, 10, 15, 20, so 25 feet slope. You've got like a ravine over here and a drainage easement. And when you go to the lot, this is a very low area. It's you can see half the neighborhood drains there. This is up a good bit higher. These are 5 foot in between, 5 foot of drop in between these lines. So I'm going to look at, this was an existing septic permit we found on file. Originally, they had the house way back here. Driveway up on the uphill side. There's a gully here. And they have the area for septic and area for repair up here, but this takes up a lot of room up front. Now, when we look at this, it tells us some clues here. It says vertical T and J panel system. That's a more expensive system. Um, anyway, so it's a vertical T and J panel system. That's more expensive than the one we saw before. And this here, it says pump. More expensive than the one I showed you in the video, the chamber system with the kind of those half pipes. Uh, right here, these both say pump system. Pumps are more expensive because you got to have a second tank with a pump. Costs thousands. Max occupants, that tells me 5 bedroom. LTAR, that stands for long-term absorption rate. It's whether or not the lot perks and it absorbs liquid at the right rate. 0.35 is the highest you can get. As I understand, 0.3 is still good. So that tells us it's good soil on the lot. So let's go back and look at that. Now, if you remember on the permit, they had the driveway up on the high side here. But these folks designed a courtyard entry. Now, when you come in here, you have a lot of slope. So we're going to have to take out a wide swath of trees, and that might take up the area we have for the septic, for our septic field. Now, and they also had the house further back, another 60 feet back. But what I'm thinking, and I'm hoping, is we can put septic back here, right? There's a lot of space back here and still have room for a swimming pool that they want. So I'm going to we're going to choose to go with a private soil scientist. They can usually meet you out there and have more flexibility than the folks at the county. There's so much building going on. The folks at the county are usually backlogged, and they want you to have the house staked out, and they come out and tell you here's a system, septic system you can have. Some of them have some flexibility and will give you options. Most of them say, here's your permit. If you don't like that, then you can reapply for a new one. And we have to start the whole process over again and wait months. Not always months, but most of the time. It just takes forever. And they don't have, I don't think they really have as many options to be flexible. We're a private engineer. It's like we can do it this way, we could do it that way. Could we put it up front? And you can check that out for us, and they're generally easier to work with. But I want to have a nice big driveway here. Now, this part of the house, this half of the house is going to be on basement. This part's going to be on a crawl space. So we can cut some of the height out of here, and where we dig out for the basement, we can move some of that soil in here because this kind of drops down in a hole, and you don't want that for your driveway. But I'm also seeing this tongue kind of sticks out further, and after walking the lot, I'm thinking if we pull this back and put your garage more right on that high spot, it might work out a little better, which cuts into some space, but it's still there's a lot of space back here for a septic, especially since it's not going to be a 5 bedroom. So that's what I see there. But this is kind of a complicated lot, and this is a very popular neighborhood, been around for a while, and all the flat, easy lots are gone. So I built several in that neighborhood. Now, this one I just brought up because it's interesting. I think this is an assisted living center that I'm involved in. It's actually 2 residential homes converted and put together with a covered porch, and there's another building we have over on the other side of it. And this one, we bought the property. This right here was an old duplex that is now condemned. And so when we bought it, it was past its useful life. It was just old, and the previous owner used it for storage. But the municipality came by and said, guys, that building's condemned. You need to tear it down. So we tore it down. But what these contours show me, okay, what happens, these lighter gray lines are the existing contours. These dark lines are a proposed contour because we did a grading plan to build several buildings up here. And this facility right here, this is a river right on the left side. So you can see the river, and it's got some little small rapids and rocks, and it's fun to look at. It's a really beautiful site for the people in the center. Now, when you come up the road here, this basement from where they are, these contour lines are what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. About a 7-foot drop from here to there. So with an 8-foot basement, you got to have some height, be above the road for water runoff and people in wheelchairs and whatnot. But if we look over here, we look over here, right? You go from the road, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 feet. Every one of these lines is a 1-foot drop. That's what we call them, 1-foot contours. That's not really practical to be that high for a basement because we want to put some rooms in the basement as well. I have like a walkout basement because they have a view of the lake. We want to put a walkway around here so people can walk around or wheelchair around and put a deck so they can get a nice view. So I left 20 feet so we can have a 10-foot deck because we got to be 10 foot off the property line. But this proposed right here, if we went here, we're like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 feet up from here, which is perfect for a 10-foot basement. So we could probably bump this out, but we have to get all that. We have to fulfill this grading plan before we're prepared to build this building. And that could be a long way off because that's a significant expense and time to do that. So we really have to get planned to put all these buildings together. But anyhow, this is a little more complex than your residential house, but since we are portraying these concepts, I thought it would be interesting and kind of explain to people how all this works. So hopefully you found something useful here. If you did, please hit the like button. That helps us out a whole bunch. And we do appreciate you spending the time to visit our site. Thanks again. If you have questions, feel free to get in touch with us.